Hello, and welcome to the podcast. This is Get in the Driver's Seat. We're telling stories about leadership moments in small to mid-sized professional practices. I'm your host, Sandra Bekhor, a practice management coach at Bekhor Management. I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Erin Cowling, a former corporate commercial litigator and now founder and CEO of Flex Legal Network, Inc. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you for having me.
Erin is also a graduate of Ella Ascent and Altitude, an accelerator program offered by York University, where I happen to be an entrepreneur in residence. So it was a great opportunity for us to get to know each other even better. And I'm so excited for you, Erin, for all the growth that you and your firm have undergone as a result of this Ella program, but also all the things that you have done over the past 10 years. I saw your post on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And that leads us to our topic for today, growing pains. And I just want to open with a small tidbit. Did you know that the original meaning of growing pains, do you know what it is?
No, I have no idea.
Okay, so I'm a bookworm and I happened to come across this in a fiction story. It's actually literally growing pains. Like as children grow, some of them, not all of them, their bones grow so fast that they actually feel pain.
Yes, my mother would always, if I was feeling pain in my legs or whatever, she'd always say those were growing pains. And I think it was just, at the time, I thought it was just an excuse, but maybe it is true.
It's true.
Yes.
And so here it's a very nice illustration of what do businesses go through, growing pains.
Mhm.
And I always remind clients, if you are going through growing pains, it means you're successful. Remember that. It's very important to remember that because growing pains can be painful. So let's talk about some stories. You
Mhm.
know, growing pains can be in reference to you and as the owner of the firm, your own growth and the changes in your role. They can also be in reference to your team and their growth and taking on some of the things that you used to do.
Mhm.
Also adapting different things like technology, other resources, changing the functions of your firm, and bringing in other resources, external resources, whether it's consultants or other agencies, or things like what you did with Ella, or financial support, grants, investors, and other support that you wouldn't have been able to go to the next level without.
Mhm.
So, telling stories is brave, and I want to acknowledge that. And I appreciate you being here.
Thank
And in these conversations, we help other people to face their growing pains too.
you.
So, why don't we start with yourself? And I'm happy to share my stories too. I've gone through some growing pains, definitely. And so, for yourself, what comes to mind? I've heard you using this expression, which I love how you say it, a recovering people pleaser.
Yeah, I don't know if I've grown past that yet. But yeah, recovering people pleaser is
Me
definitely,
too.
yeah, it's hard. And especially when you're growing a company, you can't please everybody as the
Mm-mm.
customers grow and your employees grow and everything. You kind of have to learn to get over that and perfectionism as well.
Yeah. So, do any stories come to mind about that or other aspects of your own growth? I said as we were getting on to this podcast that I was listening to some of the other shows that you did, and you did a great job of telling your story. And another aspect of that is learning how to promote yourself, which
Hmm.
many women have, and myself included, have so much trouble doing and sometimes don't even realize we're supposed to be doing that. So that's
Yeah.
another aspect of your own personal growth, right? Any
Yeah.
stories come to mind?
Well, I think to provide some context to my entrepreneurial journey is that I kind of refer to myself as an accidental entrepreneur. And I didn't really start out thinking I was going to start a company or even grow a company past me. My my company came out as a way for me to find a way to practice law that suited my lifestyle and how I wanted to practice law. And I found freelancing. And then I got so busy, that's when I started Flex Legal. I needed other people to help me with the work. But even when I started Flex Legal, it was just me running the shop. And I was adding more freelancers, but I was still managing the company. I didn't, unlike a lot of entrepreneurs, I didn't come up one day with an idea that I'm going to scale this company, I'm going to grow it, I'm going to sell it maybe. It was really just day-to-day need. I'm getting too busy. I need to add this other person on. I need to maybe start a company and bring on some more freelancers. So when we talk about growing pains, I think I bring a different perspective than someone who started a business knowing their business would grow. Mine has really been I have a reactive way to grow the business, which now I'm learning is not the best way. And I'm trying to focus more on proactive ways to manage the growth and hit these growing pains kind of head on. And part of that, like you said, is the self-promotion and talking about ourselves and our journey. And I think a lot of that for me is struggling with the identity of being a business owner and being an entrepreneur, because as a former lawyer, your identity is really wrapped up in being a lawyer. So for a long time, I was wearing two hats, the entrepreneur and the lawyer. I was still practicing, but also running Flex Legal. And it just was not a healthy way to do things. I was like riding two horses with one bum. You can't do that. You need to pick a horse and jump on it. So I think once I did that and fully embraced the entrepreneurial hat, I can never, ever get rid of my lawyer identity, but it made the growth and seeing the company in a different light a lot easier.
Well, that was so great. I love visuals. I think visuals help us to really get a concept. Two horses, one bum. So if you shift your own role that way, it really implies that you need other people to take on all those things that you used to do yourself, which is the pain, right? That's and then you have to ask them to do it and you have to train them. And so can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, that transition?
Yeah, I think looking back now, I waited way too long to bring on another person and an employee to help me run the company. And a part of it was when I started out, I read a book called The Company of One by Paul Jarvis, I think is the name. And it's all about how you don't have to grow. You don't have to scale up. You can just be a company of one and be happy with where you are. So I sat in that company of one for a long time until I realized it just was not, I was working too much. I was doing too much. I wasn't bringing in enough money. Sometimes like you have to spend money to make money sometimes. And so it worked while it worked. And then I think it was really the Ella program that shone the light on this need that I had that I couldn't be doing at all, especially if the business was it was a little stagnant. I needed to bring on some more clients and I needed to offload some of those responsibilities. So yeah, through the Ella program, one of the goals I set with the first one, which was Ella Ascend, was to hire someone by the end of that year, and I did. And I had some help from that program, setting up the job ad and trying to find really the perfect person for that role. I hired very slowly, had a very long, well, not that long, but longer hiring process just to make sure I had the right person who could help me with the company. And I have to say, I did an amazing hire. She was wonderful. She did leave to go back to school full time, but we made a second hire to hire her replacement. And then just recently, we hired another person to help us with marketing. We hired a content marketing manager. So we've gone from a team of one managing to a team of three managing, and we have like over 100 freelance lawyers as well. But yeah, so I think the first thing for me is I waited too long. And I think a couple of the reasons I waited too long was the money aspect, because I thought, well, how am I going to pay another whole person's salary and pay my salary? Am I going to be able to afford all this? And so what I did was I set aside 3 months of salary for this employee, just so I knew I had something set aside in case, I still needed money for me. But as soon as she joined, it's funny when you have two people working on a company, you can grow the business a little faster. So we ended up like getting enough revenue in right away that I didn't even have to dip into those savings for her salary. I was able to pay her from the start and pay myself the same salary. Which led me to think, oh, I should have done this sooner. But that's hindsight's 2020. So I think it was really the money, and also just the fact that the responsibility of having someone else, you're responsible for their livelihood, but also their training and their mentoring and all that stuff that comes with having a job. And I think also just going from being the one person who was in control of everything and then having someone else come into the business and either see it for all of its flaws or trusting that person with something you've built and poured your heart and soul into over time. So I think that was a bit of a hesitation for me as well.
Wow, you hit on so many of the key points that come up literally in coaching meetings with clients who are getting ready to make either their first hire or to expand their team. Even as they're expanding the team, they still come back to these same pain points. And I feel like if, for those who are watching this, if you're at that point trying to figure out how to overcome this hurdle, just sort of listening to that itemized list, you can look at yourself and say, okay, can I create a system around this? And when you do that, you start to calm down all those feelings of doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm sure you have a lot of systems in place now, Erin, around this team management.
Yes, there are days, and I'm not going to lie, where I think, oh, it was so much easier when it was just me. Because it's just, yeah, as you add more people, you have to add more, make sure your processes are in place, your systems are in place. And then all of a sudden you're adding more software technology to help you with that. And then all of a sudden you have, instead of one login, you have about 50 logins you have to remember. You're paying for all of these subscriptions for everybody to keep everyone organized. And it's just, it can be a bit much if you're not organized and you're not on top of it. There are days where I'm like, oh, it was so much easier back then. So for example, part of our growth was when I started Flex Legal, you have no money when you're starting a company. So I did my own website on a very user-friendly, but not the best website platform. And it was that way for the longest time until last year when we realized we can't do with the website what we want to do. We can't have like a separate portal for our clients. We can't. Anyway, so we had to migrate over to WordPress, which was a bit of a headache in itself because, of course, when we went to migrate over, we lost our website for a day, and then we realized our SEO wasn't right. And then, oh God, at one point, the website was down for like 4 days. And all I kept thinking was, when it was just me on that cheap website builder, I never had these issues. But that old website builder wasn't good for mobile. Like, people look at their phones when they're looking at websites, and it wasn't very good for that. You couldn't do what we wanted to do in order to grow the company. So I just have to kind of keep thinking big picture when all of these little issues keep coming up. But definitely growing pains there. And I'm sure there'll still be more with this website moving forward, but it was something that you need to do. You need to do in order to grow and scale the company.
Well, and you put it so beautifully because it's the actions that you take to respond to those growing pains that allow you to be in that new place. You can't go to that new place without taking those steps. You will stay in that old place, even if you try and fudge it.
Yeah. Yeah, I did the most I could with that older website, but at that point, you just, yeah, if you don't take I wouldn't call them risks, but it's change, and no one likes change. And it was an uncomfortable thing for me to do, but you can't get the rewards without taking I don't want to say risks, but changes, accepting the changes that are coming your way.
Actually, I like the idea of talking about risk because I think that might be part of the reason why people don't do this, even when they're feeling ready and they stay stuck in their, their previous iteration, maybe for longer or maybe for always. And it's the facing of that risk. But when you talk about it the way you do, like, oh, okay, so I saved the 3 month, 3 months worth of salary, that's actually a way of minimizing the risk. It's pretty smart.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the I sometimes I see a lot of lawyers become entrepreneurs, but I don't know how they do that so well. I'm not the type to forget. As a lawyer, you're trained in all the risks and everything that can go wrong, and I'm used to, as a litigator, looking at my business clients problems and being like, oh my gosh, like that was silly, why did you do that? The litigator avoids all risk possible, the lawyers try to avoid all risk possible. So as an entrepreneur, I've had to kind of quiet that voice a little bit, because if I just listen to the, oh, everything could possibly go wrong litigation voice, I would never take any risks with this company. It would just tell me, okay, stick with your, this basic thing that you're doing here. If you do this, oh, you could be liable to this person. You could open yourself to lawsuits from this person. I would never grow. So that's been a huge struggle for me as a litigator / entrepreneur. And I think just looking at other businesses and other, like, I don't ever want to become. So I read, back up. I just finished reading Going Infinite by Michael Lewis, all about the Sam Bankman-Fried cryptocurrency king who has now been fraud, and he'll be sentenced soon. And I thought, oh my God, the risks this man took, and just going out there and building $1 billion company. I'm like, that is the opposite of me. But a part of me was like, I need to be a little bit more like him, not like him, obviously, but I need to shed that litigator, no risk taking side of me a little bit more and take a few more risks, quiet that people pleaser voice or that perfectionist voice, and just say, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, right? Obviously, I will not do anything illegal or fraud, but just, taking something that's getting yourself into that uncomfortable zone, I think it's needed and it's okay to do.
Yeah, I talked about this on a previous podcast about taking that 10% outside of your comfort zone regularly. So it becomes a natural thing. And that way you're always stretching.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
And you can do that in small ways, like going to more networking events, or you can do it in business planning and say, okay, well, what has been on this, this business planning list that I've seen for 3 years, and I'm tired of looking at it because it's time. How can I take one step towards this thing that I'm nervous won't work out? One small step. Don't do the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Is breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. And I think it's easy to forget the big picture stuff and have it sit on your list forever, because you're so caught up in the day-to-day stuff that you forget that there's some things that need to be done in order to improve even if your goal is not to completely scale up your company and grow it to be massive, your business can always be improved. Your business can always be better. And so you do need to step back from the day-to-day and look at that list. And you're right, you'll get overwhelmed if you're like, oh, I need to completely overhaul our processes, or I need to find a completely new way of our accounting software. What little things that you can do to break that down so that you can improve the business over time.
Yeah. And we've never talked about this, but what gave you the idea to do the Ella program?
I think someone recommended it. I don't remember who, but they suggested it. And I think I was at the point where I knew as much as I could about running a business, and I thought it'd be a great educational experience. I'm a lifelong learner. I love reading. I love taking online courses. So I thought this would be a good way, even if worst case scenario, I don't implement anything that they suggest, I'm at least learning something new and meeting other people. So I think I was at that right spot in my entrepreneurial journey where I needed to go outside of my own self-learning to reach out to other experts.
Well, and I ask this in relation to our conversation about stretching, because sometimes you actually need the support of others to even to stretch a little bit. So a program like, Ella, it's just an example of gaining some knowledge about structure or having mentorship or peers. And I've heard, some of these mastermind groups that they survive these accelerator programs for years because people find it very helpful to have peers to bounce ideas off of so they can keep stretching, so they can keep doing that. And they feel stronger just because they have the peers that they regularly check in with who are telling them about their own experiences and giving them the encouragement that the risk isn't as big as they think it is.
Yeah, for sure. I'm still in touch with one of the women entrepreneurs from the first mastermind group, from the first program. We meet the last Wednesday of every month. And it's the same thing. Like she'll say, "Oh, you won't believe the week I had." And she'll talk about the issue she had. I'm like, "Oh my God, I just experienced the same thing last week or last month. This is how I handled it." And it feels good just to know someone else is going through that. And especially when you don't have a partner or co-founder for your business, it's nice. You feel like everything's on your shoulders. It's nice to have somebody outside of the business who can kind of see your business a little clearer as well. When you're in it, you don't see everything. You have to they have that, 1,000-foot view of your business a little better than you can. And they can see things that you don't see, that improvements or steps you can take. And it's always nice to have that other person to bounce ideas off as well.
I have the same experience as a coach. So I know you've done coaching as well, Erin. I'm I'm getting my certification as a positive intelligence coach, and it's through the process you are in a pod with other coaches, and even though we're all learning the same steps, you choose your own pod, so you do have similar experience. You're at similar stage in your career journey, but everybody's lens on their next steps and your next steps is very different. And I recently had one of these experiences of, okay, I'm getting ready to do something, and they're all looking at me like, you have no idea how ready you are. Like, this is, you go get them. And looking at the Zoom with
Yeah,
5 peers who are telling me go. It's very, very powerful.
it is. It is. You have that little cheering team ready for you.
Yes, of people you believe in. Like,
Yeah.
you actually respect them, and you trust that they have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, it's a little different than, of course, like my husband or my mother or my best
Yeah.
friend will say the same things to me, but I don't, and I know they mean it, but it's like if it's someone who's actually in it and is an entrepreneur and doing the same things, I take their word a little more seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really helps. Well, it helped me to say, just do it. It's time. And sometimes if you feel nervous about doing something, the nervousness is just a temperament. It doesn't actually mean that the risk is large. So it's very important to have that ability to discern.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when you're trying something new, you're going to be nervous. And if you're not nervous, then I don't know, maybe maybe you're not stretching enough. Uh,
Right.
yeah, if everything's easy and whatever, you need to stretch yourself a little bit more.
So, one of the exercises I love doing with people who are at this point, this I'm in the middle of my before and my after of my my business, is to write out their future bio. And a lot of owners of professionals firms, small to mid-size, they love doing this. It's really an imaginative exercise with no filters on it, right? This is just, nobody needs to look at it. It's yours, but you get to really think, if I didn't have any of these current constraints, what do
Mhm.
I really want? And if
Mm,
you're really, really honest about what you want, you can build a bridge to get there. Because
that
now
sounds,
you have a destination.
yes, that sounds like a great exercise. Yeah.
So, okay, so we've talked a little bit about your journey and the growing pains you've experienced. Have you had other sort of more macro level growing pains, just getting awards, getting financial support, grants, anything else that you want to talk about that's just a bigger picture dealing with growing pains?
Yeah, I think you can for like financial side, we're bootstrapped. We've any money I raised was going back into the company for the first little bit, but I think I was afraid of I don't know, afraid of taking on any kind of debt to grow the company until I got to the point where I'm like, sometimes you have to spend money to make money, and you shouldn't be afraid of a strategic business loan that you need in order to grow past where you are. That was once again the risk side of me, worrying about stuff like that. But even with the grants and everything, you apply for everything, you do your best. We've been successful with quite a few, like 3 or 4 grants we've been given, which is great and really help. And it kind of also makes you feel like what you're doing is validated, because these grant people giving the grants must have some faith in your company that you're still going to be standing the next month. So those have all been great as well. I don't know what other big picture.
Well, technology, I guess if you're updating I mean, I know that your business started as tech friendly in the first place. It's built into the work you do, but you have also had to expand. You just talked about it earlier about enabling it for your team. So do
Yeah.
you have to face growing pains with technology?
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of a sore spot here, but we had some grand plans to build a platform that would work. Let's just say it didn't quite work out. We're back at square one again, but it's definitely a learning experience that I know what questions to ask next time. I know when something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Luckily, it wasn't too much of an issue for us, but yeah, technology. So that big platform was a bit of we're back at square one with that. But even just the choosing which software to use, choosing which programs to use, like you have to test them out and figure out which ones are going to work for you, which ones are. That's a bit of a headache as well. And then seeing if your team is on board with it too. Just because I like the one that would work, maybe the other ones it's not intuitive for them to use as well. So, but you definitely need. There's so much great stuff out there that you can use to make your business more efficient and move things faster through the pipelines. And so I think if you're stuck in only using one old way of doing things, you're kind of missing out on ways to make your business run a little smoother.
Well, okay, so I hear your pain and, describing something that didn't work out. I could hear it without the words, just the
Yeah.
but what I love is that you actually described that whole scenario and then you described how you're going to keep going anyway.
Yeah, of course.
That's
Of
great.
course. Now we're probably, 10 months behind where we want to be, but I feel like we're in a better place now. We have a better foundation of knowing where we want to be in the next year with the technology. So,
Hmm. So sometimes sometimes you have to have a false start to learn more about your real needs and the change in the marketplace. But you're describing something interesting, which is, I think, a difficult spot for a lot of small to mid-size firm owners, which is how do you know what's ahead? How do you predict the future, right? Because growing pains implies that you're moving into some bigger future. But how do you know what that future holds? And we just came through a pandemic. So people are even more nervous about what is in the future. So what's your process for projecting forward?
yeah, pandemic, recession, it's
I
all
know.
thrown at us. So, no one has a crystal ball. You can kind of gauge where you think things are going. But I always think, I know what I know. I know my business. I know what I'm offering. I know it's a great service. If we don't grow at what I think our financial forecast will be for this year, I know that I know where we've gone. I think that's what I'm trying to say is like, I know our past. I know it's a solid foundation. I'm not concerned with the future and anything that'll throw at me. I feel like I have a solid base to kind of confront it. Will there be setbacks? Obviously. Will there be great times? Obviously. I've experienced that all with the business where some months you're like, oh my gosh, we're making so much money. This is how it's going to be for the future. And then the next month comes and you're like, ooh, no, this is not what. So you just get used to the ups and downs. You get used to okay, what's the issue I'm dealing with this month? Because there's always going to be something stressing you out. And I think that helps with the stress level and dealing with being a business owner is that I've come to accept the fact that there will always be something and not stress over it. I think I used to be like, okay, once I solve this issue, everything's going to be perfect. And then I would hit with the next issue and I'd be so devastated because I'm like, oh, I have to deal with something else now. But it's like, no, when you're prepared, things are just going to come at you. And so now I'm like, okay, so what's next? Bring it on. I'm ready.
Mm-hmm. I heard once this interesting way of getting people used to unpacking difficult feelings about change, and making it more normal. And that was teaching your team how to do this in a comfortable way. Just an example. If you're sitting in a regular meeting, so you have regular partner meetings or regular team meetings, whatever it is, at the end of your meeting, have a ritual where you ask people, so what went right and what went wrong? And you go around the room and you ask them, and everybody has to comment. It doesn't matter what their job title is. So then they start getting used to it. And then when something really difficult comes up that people would have avoided, they won't avoid it because they have the language, they
Right.
have the experience in talking about things and trusting that it won't come across as judgmental and they won't be punished for saying what they needed to say.
Interesting. Yeah. So that when you ask them to comment on what went right and what went wrong, you're talking about just that specific meeting.
So you can do it, you can adapt it to whatever you want. So you can say, how could we have done this meeting better? Or you can say, tell us about your week. What were our for the firm. So tell us about your week, what went right, what went wrong. So you're talking about yourself or about anybody here or about all of us. Or we just did a big presentation or we just completed a big deadline. So you can adapt it to different scenarios, just getting people used to doing this. It's practicing conflict. That's what you're doing, really. And in doing that, you're getting more comfortable talking about things, building that stronger foundation so that you really can respond to changes as they happen
Right.
in real time. So, is there anything about the team that you've noticed them experiencing their own growing pains?
Yeah, I think I haven't brought on team members who have any legal background, which was kind of by design. I was more focusing on the skills I needed for those positions. So for our manager of operations, someone who was very organized and who understood people, and her role has a lot to do with talking to our law firm clients and our freelancers, and someone who wasn't afraid to pick up the phone. Some of the skills maybe that I don't necessarily have, so she could fill in those gaps that I had. So I think part of that, though, because she doesn't have the legal background, I think there was a bit of a struggle, or not struggle, but there's a bit of a learning curve, a steep learning curve, of learning all the lingo and dealing with lawyers and how they're a bit of an odd bunch sometimes when it comes to certain things, and dealing with law firms and all of that. So I think that, and I think our newest employee that we brought on, it was easier when I first brought the first employee on. It was a very basic company. We had a few logins, like I was saying, and a few things we use. Now it's a much more robust company. And I don't think we've updated our onboarding process so to reflect that as much. So I think she's needed a little bit more time to be onboarded into how we do things as a larger company than when it was just me running it. But hopefully we're facing both of those issues, and I'm helping them to transition through them as well.
So again, and we came back to systems.
Mm-hmm.
Having the systems in place helps everybody to address their growing pains as they go through them. But you're also rightly recognizing that the systems always have to be updated. You can't just do it once. Okay. This has been an amazing conversation. Erin, is there anything else you want to say before we say goodbye for our listeners who may be facing their own growing pains?
Yeah, I think really sometimes you just need to hold your nose and jump in, and don't be afraid. I think trust your own skills that have gotten you this far. Sometimes that little confidence, that confident voice inside of you that gets drowned out by the people pleaser and by the perfectionist. You just have to let the other voices sit back a bit and let that confident voice shine through and listen to them and let them guide your decisions moving forward. And I think that'll help with any growth decisions you make and any changes that you're going through as an entrepreneur.
Do you have any practices that help you to get back into that confident character when you're feeling the self-doubt? You know, all of us have our little go-to secret practices. Is there anything you want to share?
Sometimes I just have to step back and remind myself of what I've done. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wow, Erin, you actually built a company. You have employees. You have like 100 freelancers and all of these law firms relying on your services across Canada. And I think just stepping back and looking at that now and again really is like, okay, Erin, yeah, no, you've done this. So I try to do that. I try the last Friday of every month, I take a couple of hours and I go away from my office and I go to a coffee shop without my phone. And I just have my little book and paper and pen. And I just kind of reflect on being a business owner. And I think in those moments as well, the confidence comes because you can kind of step back from the day-to-day and really put your entrepreneur hat on. And that helps as well. And also, you know, I keep a little folder in my email account where anyone sends me a compliment or tells me I've done a wonderful thing. If I'm feeling really bad about myself, I open up that folder and I read a few of those emails. And it's like, see, Erin, you're not so bad.
Those are great tips. I love them. Please, listeners, try them out. Wonderful. Thank you, Erin, for your time and for your insights.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yes. And to our listeners, if you are interested in learning more about Erin Cowling, founder and CEO of Flex Legal Network, Inc., please go to flexlegalnetwork.com. You've been listening to Get in the Driver's Seat, stories about leadership moments in small to mid-sized professional practices. I'm your host, Sandra Bekhor, practice management coach at Bekhor Management. Take care, everybody.